Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Heba and I'm the Khalid Center practitioner servicing the students, faculty, and staff at Zaytuna College. When reflecting upon our lives prior to the pandemic, some words that come to mind that describes our state back then are exasperation, fatigue, overwhelm, and heedlessness, caused by internal and external preoccupations tugging at us seemingly from every which direction. The state of being in overdrive, when lasting for prolonged periods, becomes a spiritual and emotional anesthetic. Now, in the medical world, we know that anesthesia is a medically induced loss of sensation in the body in order for us to be able to undergo any type of medical procedure. When we're always in active mode, however, we become numb and unaware of the need for any change in our lives, similar to the effect that anesthesia has on the body. It's become absurdly easy for us to become distracted through a flood of social media platforms, media channels, podcasts, and a stream of mostly futile information that fills the mind, yet blinds the heart. By being busy, we're collectively trapped into the thinking parts of our brains, and our capacity to connect with our feelings and emotional states decreases due to us being in a mode of functioning that is more closely tied to our sympathetic nervous system, or what's more commonly known as the fight, flight, or freeze stress response of the body. When you're in that state for months on end, the body begins to protest and ceases to cooperate in helping you to fulfill your daily duties and tasks and long-term goals and aspirations. This form of protesting may manifest into physical symptoms. So you may begin to feel migraines, you may struggle with insomnia when you've never had a problem falling asleep or staying asleep before. You may notice a fluctuation in your appetite where one day you're overeating and the next day you're skipping meals entirely. Or maybe you're noticing that you're becoming more irritable and falling into conflict with your loved ones and those whom you interact with. Now, much research and scientific findings today point to the fact that when we fail to prioritize caring for ourselves in a holistic manner, disease or dis-ease begins to develop in the body. Dr. Gabor Mate, a world-renowned physician who has extensive experience in working with those with terminal illnesses, he states that he notices a common denominator amongst all of his patients that can be observed from reading their obituaries. And these statements are, they only stopped working a few days prior to their death while receiving chemotherapy, or they never upset anyone in their lives, or they prioritized everyone and everything before themselves and they always thought of themselves last. Now, Dr. Mate states that the very things that we value in others are the things that end up killing them. Everyone values that tremendously generous friend who is always there to uplift you in your time of need. Or your spouse who always puts themselves last in order to put you and the family first. When we fail to care for our core basic needs, the emotion that tends to build up internally is one of suppressed anger. Anger that we often misdirect at others, thinking that they are the cause for why we are unable to prioritize our health and well-being. Yet we have failed to advocate for our essential needs, upon which our well-being depends. Now, we should all be striving to be in a state of service or khidmah to those who we know and those whom we don't know alike. However, when this state of service comes at the expense of our own health and well-being, we may need to retrace our steps in order to reassess if we have the correct understanding of what service entails. Oftentimes, a prerequisite for change is pain. So in actuality, pain is an agent of change. And we cannot process the need for change in our lives when we are in a state of being busy, as it necessitates primarily a state of self-awareness and a connection to self in order to have the ability to engage in the cognitive exercises that are crucial, such as contemplation, introspection, and reflection. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala invites us throughout the Quran to engage in these cognitive exercises often, as they allow us to derive a deeper meaning and purpose in our lives and to develop a more profound connection with our Creator. One such example of that is stated in Surah An-Nisa, ayah 82, when Allah states, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ. Do they not contemplate or reflect upon the deeper meanings of the Quran, or do we merely engage with the Quran in a very superficial manner? Now, why contemplation, you may ask? Now, al-tadabbur comes from the root word dubur, which is the ends of things. And by reflecting on our trajectory in life and the likely outcome of that, we can better assess how to preventatively align our habits and our decision-making to a path that is more pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our emotions are critical and help us in this process of contemplation, as our emotions begin to warn us through generating feelings of guilt, remorse, and anxiety when we begin to slip and veer off the path. When we are in a state of haste and preoccupation with the external realm, we cannot tune into what our emotions are trying to communicate to us. Many individuals have an uncomfortable relationship with their emotions. They're not attuned to them, nor do they quite grasp what their purpose is. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has bestowed us with the gift of emotions as a means of information or data. And a great problem of our times today is that we have drastically shifted from understanding our emotions to be a source of information to misperceiving them to be directives that now govern our lives. And that is when we begin to go astray. Now, post-pandemic, we've all been dealing with a sense of grief over a loss of structure in our lives and everything that we deem to be normal. Perhaps you are a single parent who has lost your spouse during the pandemic, and now you painfully have to play the role of both mother and father, along with maintaining your work status and serving in the role of a teacher, helping your children navigate the online learning experience from home. Or maybe you're a college student whose parents have lost their jobs due to the pandemic, and you can no longer solely have the luxury of focusing on your studies, as you have been tasked with financially supporting your family at this time, and that is no easy endeavor. To successfully navigate these increasingly tumultuous times, it is important to remember that we must remain within our internal locus of control that we have been bestowed with by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are a process-oriented ummah, not an outcomes-oriented one, for outcomes and results are solely within the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our efforts, our energy, and our attention can be found within this internal sphere of control, along with our behaviors, our mannerisms or our adab, the way that we engage with situations and circumstances, and the way that we make others feel in our presence. And one of the biggest ploys of Satan is to drive us out of our internal locus of control and pushing us into the external sphere of control, where we will be met with states related more to constriction, such as hopelessness and despair. He promises you poverty, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warns us, يَعِذُكُمُ الْفَقْرِ. And this poverty comes in the form of negative thoughts and ideas that we run with and ruminate on, making us feel increasingly powerless and anxious by the minute. By dwelling within our internal sphere of control, we are empowered to reflect on our internal states, determine what needs changing in our lives and how, and engaging in the ultimate self-care practices of contemplation, introspection, and reflection, as very oppositely depicted in the media of spending exorbitant amounts of money and living a very lavish lifestyle. Now remember that self-awareness is the vehicle, and pain is our collective fuel at this time that'll allow us to arrive at a state of betterment while utilizing this gift of a slower pace of life that we have presented with or been presented with at this time. May all of this information help us to arrive at a state that is more befitting before the Lord of the worlds. I thank you all for listening, and I pray that this message finds you and your family and loved ones in a state of afiyah and well-being. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.